Well, first of all, some companies do what, say, Google does. They say 1 out of 5 days a week, you do whatever you want. We're a little more disciplined because we make commitments to customers that products will ship at a certain time, and people build their business depending on our ability to do that. So we're not quite that laissez-faire about it. But what we do is encourage people to do two things. One is to do as much innovation as their schedule will allow them to do. We don't stifle them. They may do it on their own. They may do it from home, wherever they do it. And secondly, we provide constant examples of people who have done innovation, who have gotten their ideas into products. And sometimes they don't come out as a separate product, but they come out as an enhancement to a product that's already there. And so some of the most innovative things that keeps a product like Photoshop in such a leadership position are innovations that were done inside the company by people who just had an idea. They go off and innovate it. If they do that, we typically give them some restricted stock. We find other ways to reward them. And more importantly, they get their name on the package that says that they've done something. So it's really the ability to provide enough flexibility that the people who are good at doing it are given the opportunity. And let me give you one sort of description about how we think about it as a business. We say in our engineering, primarily engineering, although it sometimes involves folks from the marketing side as well, is that people fall into three categories. There are arrow shooters, there are scouts, and there are road builders. An arrow shooter is a person who has an idea. He says, I think that would be really cool. And he can sort of conjecture what the idea is, and he knows that what he wants to do is shoot the arrow and have it land out there in the jungle somewhere. But he can't quite figure out how to pull it together. So he begins to work with a couple of scouts. And scouts are really good at tracking through the jungle and proving that they can find out where the arrow landed. They don't pay a lot of attention to all the niceties and simplicities of things that may not always work reliably, but they can get there very fast. And once they've done that, they can demonstrate to people whether or not the idea has merit, because it's good enough to do that. And then we as a company make a decision that's something we want to put out in the marketplace. Then we bring in the road builders. The road builders don't shoot arrows. They don't do things very fast. They do them very reliably. And they build a highway from where that arrow was shot to where the arrow landed. Now, the truth is that every person can at one point in their working career be an arrow shooter, a scout, or a road builder. What you can never let happen is have somebody think they're an arrow shooter when they're being supposed to be a road builder and all the other variations on that. And that's what management and leadership in the company has to do. And we encourage everyone to be an arrow shooter. There are a lot of people who just know they're not arrow shooters. There are a lot of people who are really happy and incredibly good at just being road builders. They know how to take the well-defined idea and make it, faster, better, more reliable than anybody else, and that's where they get their pride. And as long as everybody's happy with that, they all get rewarded the same way. You don't get paid more just because you're an arrow shooter, or you don't get paid less if you're, quote, just a road builder. And they all have high respect in the company.
The reason the community is important, frankly, is it's important to the employees. The employees want to feel that they work within an organization in the community that's really responsive to the needs of the community. As you can imagine, early on, John and I would just get an avalanche of phone calls, particularly as Adobe became more visible and more successful, about would you support this, would you do this, we need some help here. It's very difficult to deal with that because all of the causes that are being presented to you by and large are very good causes. And so we basically abdicated our personal responsibility, and we made a decision fairly early on to ask for a volunteer committee of our employees who would be our philanthropy council, and let the employees decide where we would invest our resources in terms of community service and community support. And every year we allocate a certain percentage of our profits to a pool of money that then they distribute on a worldwide basis. I think the thing that I feel most positive about the experience of this last 20 years is that instinctively, as I've traveled around the world, people recognize our products, they recognize the quality of them, and in many cases they take the initiative to walk up to me, and I know they've done this to John and to others as well, and say, your products made a difference in my life, in my working career, in my creativity. And that, at the end of the day, is the biggest compliment an engineer can get. Because every one of us go into product development and engineering and scientific endeavors in the hopes that we can make an impact in the world. And the ability and the opportunity to do that is the greatest reward you can get as an engineer.
Well, that was very sobering. And when something like that happens, you sort of have to make a gut check and go back to the core principles that you had in mind when you started your business. The first principle that John and I agreed on immediately when we started Adobe is that we wanted to build a company that we personally would like to work for. We figured if we'd like to work for it, all the other nerds that we knew would like to work for it too. So that was principle number one. Second principle was that we was clear that we were a business that was built exclusively with intellectual capital. You know, we had no factories. We really didn't make anything. The fact that you had to distribute software on a disk was sort of an accident in those days. And we really had nothing other than what was in the heads of our employees and ourselves that was real capital or real ownership by the company of anything. We also had a principle that we would hire the very best people that we could find, independent of whether they're male or female, whatever their ethnic background was, whatever their cultural preferences were, didn't matter. Just so they were the best people that we could find for the jobs that we were trying to hire for. And in fact, I've always told our managers, hire people who are smarter than you. First of all, it's a larger population from which to choose. Oh, glad you got that one. And secondly, if you hire people who are smarter than you, they'll take your job away and you'll have to get promoted. So it's the best way to develop your career. The other principle we had is that we wanted to build a company of inventors. Our job was to innovate and to build products that fulfill that market gap analysis that I mentioned a few moments ago. So if you look like a product or a technology like PostScript, there was nothing like that in the market in those days. You either had a dot matrix printer or a simulated typewriter that was run like a printer, nothing that could take raster and produced high quality typography, line art, and photographs. Photoshop. When we introduced Photoshop, there were no digital cameras. The scanner was about the size of a refrigerator and cost $40,000 to $50,000. There were no inkjet printers that could produce high-quality prints in your home or in your office. Yet instinctively we knew that if printing went digital, then photography and eventually video would have to. And so we went in there early, got 100% market share, tried to sell the idea to Kodak. Kodak said, no, we like yellow boxes. Yellow boxes are our future. Went to Japan, to Fuji. They said, very interesting. They took on the technology and they built some of the first digital cameras. Acrobat. When Acrobat came out, there was no internet. It came out about 3 or 4 years early. People sort of didn't have this concept of the electronic document, but it has ended up in resulting in trillions of pages out on the World Wide Web and pretty much on every person's computer. So that thing of thriving on innovation was critical.